Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here in the community chats at Montefiore Nyack Hospital. Today, we're going to be talking about fruits and what's the buzz about fruits, because we hear about fruits all the time. People tell us they're good for us, but are they really? Or like, what's so important about them? So we have today one of our best dietitians here in Montefiore Nyack Hospital, and I have to say one of them just because I don't want to be politically incorrect to say the best one, but this is Denise Roma. And Denise, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into nutrition, when you started working at Monte Nyack?
Sure. Thanks, Sandra, and thanks for hosting this interesting webinar for today. And I see that Michelle Kleiman just joined us, and she's also another wonderful registered dietitian with the Rockland County Department of Health. So we are well represented here amongst our colleagues. And so, yeah, I've been in the field of nutrition for quite a few years, probably since the 80s. And, you know, I always had an interest in health personally and physical fitness. And I always did believe that what we put in our bodies makes a difference in how our bodies perform. And so that kind of inspired me to get into this field. And so I've been doing it for quite some time. And I've been here at Montefiore Nyack probably coming up on 11 years this year. Where does the time go? It certainly has gone very quickly. And so, yeah, so that's a little bit about myself. And I'm happy to be here with everybody to talk about fruits as superfoods.
Okay, so let's get ourselves started. And I know that some of you have joined because you have questions about like fruits and just eating healthy and all of that. So Denise, is every fruit a superfruit and a superfood, or are there specific ones that we should be talking about?
Well, I do think that certain ones have different benefits over others. And I do think that they all have different antioxidants and different anti-inflammatory properties. And so I guess I fall back on, you know, one of my philosophies about nutrition, and that is, you know, we need to just have a variety and incorporate different types, you know, eating for color, I think makes really good sense because we get different things from different types of fruits, you know, whether we're talking about strawberries or blueberries or mangoes, they all give us different things, and they all contribute to what we call, you know, that superfood category, or phytonutrients, as we sometimes call them in fruits. So, you know, I think it's most important people find what they like. You know, certainly I could tell you that blueberries have great properties and strawberries have great properties and mangoes, but if you don't like them, then you have to find the ones that are your favorites and look for ways on how you can incorporate those into your daily diet. That's the key, right? Figuring out how can I get this into my diet, you know, on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm. But what about other foods? Why don't we call proteins superfoods, or why don't we call carbohydrates superfoods? I think it's the opposite, right? Carbohydrates are kind of the enemy.
Yeah, so, you know, I think as a registered dietitian nutritionist, I think it's all about balance and moderation. And, you know, if we were talking about proteins or carbohydrates, I think I would, you know, talk about my favorite choices within those categories. And so, you know, there's good foods in good nutrition, I would say, in all types of foods. But certainly it's about building sort of that balance. I think a lot of people have heard over the years about the plate method, right? And so I think as dietitians, we find that a very simple way to explain to people how to eat, because it's sort of about balancing our plate and adding, you know, a serving of fruit to it as well. So, you know, back on fruits, you know, they are superfoods because they do have lots of these health boosting compounds, if you will, that are considered antioxidants and anti-inflammatory foods. And so, they're things that we want to look to put in our diet every day. People often ask, well, how much fruit do I need to get into my diet each day? And so, anywhere from 2 to 5 servings a day is probably considered a good amount. Somebody who maybe has lower calorie needs, perhaps on the lower end, maybe towards the 2, and somebody who maybe consumes a little bit more in calories, maybe trying to get towards that, 5 servings a day. And, a serving is not a lot. When we're talking about a serving size, people often ask, well, what's a serving size? And how much is considered a serving size? Oh, I see Elaine has joined us. Hi, Elaine.
Hi, how are you?
Good. So, a serving size, if we're talking about a fresh piece of fruit, probably looks like, the size of a woman's fist, or I'll hold mine up for you, or a tennis ball. And if you're talking about dried fruits like plums, right, they have a lot of great properties as well. Probably something like a quarter of a cup. And, if you get out a measuring cup and look at that, that's not a lot. A quarter of a cup is not a big portion size of dried fruit. And if you're talking about fresh or frozen or canned, about a half a cup. So you can hear from those portion sizes that, it's achievable. It's something that with a little thought, a little creativity, and I'm sure we're going to talk about that as we move on today, you can work it into your daily diet for sure.
Okay. Thank you, Lenny. So now that Elaine got here, Elaine, welcome. So
Thank you.
Elaine is our other panelist. So Elaine, let's introduce you. So tell us a little bit about yourself. How long have you been working in Montefiore Nyack? Another fantastic dietitian here in Montefiore Nyack. Please.
Yes. So my name's Elaine Carlavaro, and I'm a registered dietitian and also a specialist for breastfeeding here at the prenatal center. And I've been here for about 7 years now. So it's been my pleasure really to really serve the community in this way.
Mm-hmm. So I'll repeat the question that I made to Denise earlier. Like, why do we call fruits superfoods, in your opinion? And why it has to be fruits and not other foods like proteins or carbs?
Well, I think that I didn't hear what was said before, so this might have been touched on. But when I think about fruits, I think about the color and how important the color is, because the color is an indication of the phytochemicals that are so essential to cardiovascular health and preventing diabetes. Those phytonutrients are they play a very significant role in reducing inflammation. And especially now in the age of COVID, inflammation is something that people are a lot more aware of and a lot more concerned about. And so, understanding that there's a connection between color and inflammation in your body is pretty significant.
Elaine, do you mind explaining a little bit more about that color and inflammation? Does that mean that there are specific colors that we need to eat to cause inflammation or reduce inflammation? How does that work?
Sure. When you think about a rainbow and all the different colors that are in the rainbow is made up of red, orange, yellow, and purple, green. There's wonderful colors that are in the rainbow. And so when you're evaluating the plant chemical content of that fruit, you want to look for color that is going to be in the rainbow, something that is obviously purple or very deep in its orange color, because that's each color is a different phytochemical, so they're not all the same. So each chemical is going to be represented by a different fruit. And so, and citrus is a wonderful fruit as well, because that's going to also have an addition of vitamin C. So these are all powerful chemicals in your body that can reduce inflammation, and that in the long run is going to really protect your health.
Mhm. Why is it so important to reduce inflammation?
So inflammation is something that when you think about over time, when it may not, you know, when you think about a fire and sparks coming off of a fire. So each time a spark lands and burns a hole, say in your shirt, it's not such a concern, you know, if it's maybe just a little mark, little burn mark. But if you stay near that fire and you have ashes constantly, you know, burning holes in your shirt, eventually that shirt's just not going to be useful anymore. And, you know, a cell is not much different from that shirt. When you have a lot of inflammation going on in your body, there's these little fires burning everywhere. And, you know, eventually there's going to be enough little holes burned in those cell walls that those cells are just not going to be able to perform the function that they were created to do. And that's sort of one way that I like to think about inflammation. That's easy to, you know, it's easy to picture. It's a good visual.
Okay, yes, thank you. That's very clear. So Denise, back to you. You were talking about like how much fruit we need to eat on a day, but I have a question about that. And here is a question from Jill. You know, there is natural sugar in the food. So how is that different from the regular sugar? Is that bad for you? Can you eat too much at any given point? Because you were talking about portions, right? So can I eat too many bananas and get too many sugar from bananas? Like, what's the case?
Good question. Yeah. And so, you know, I think when we talk about food, we need to recognize that portions, moderation is certainly key. And so while you hear Elaine and I speaking about the positive properties of fruits, like anything else, to Sandra's point, can I eat too many bananas? Sure. You know, over consuming means we would over consume in terms of the carbohydrate and sugar intake that we get. So while I want to encourage everybody who's listening to us today to see fruits as helpful foods, to see them as things we want to incorporate in our diet, I would say, first and foremost, make sure you're choosing fresh fruit. You know, juice has a place, but I think all of us as registered dietitians feel if you give us a choice, we would encourage you to choose the fresh fruit because, you know, you're getting so much more fiber and so much more added benefits by consuming a whole fruit as opposed to consuming juice. So I think if you are mindful of how much fruit you consume in a day, and I'm going to refer back to that 2 to 5 servings a day as being the magic number, then we will be getting a healthy amount of carbohydrate. And I don't really feel we need to be so concerned about the natural sugar that comes within those fresh fruits. Certainly, think about this, replacing maybe one of your, you know, very sugary kind of foods with a serving of fruit, which would satisfy a sweet craving, is a better choice, right? So not to say we can never have cake or cookies, but look, if we can make sure we get those servings of fruit in first, and then consider allowing ourselves some of those other treats, I think that's pretty much the way to go and to get those superfoods or fruits into us.
Mm-hmm. Now, what do you think, both of you, and we can start with you, Elaine, do you need to include a variety of food or fruits in your diet? Or, you know, they say an apple a day keeps the doctor away. So if I only eat an apple every day or 3 apples a day, is that healthy enough? Or do I need to include a variety, and why?
Well, I think variety can it can be a very useful tool when you think in terms of color, because the fruits oftentimes are going to come in colors that vegetables often don't. So most vegetables are green. That's very easy. So when you're picking a fruit, think about what colors are missing in your day. And if you're eating a lot of green vegetables, then you may not want to have green grapes or a green apple. So by picking a variety, you're actually working toward getting all the different colors. And well, you know, one of the most important colors is the purples and blues, and that's probably the one color that most people don't get every day. And that's a real critical phytochemical. That's resveratrol, and that can really protect your brain when you think about the risk for Alzheimer's disease today and what's happening with memory. And so the purple fruits like the blueberries, what's another one, purple one, the very dark purple grapes are going to be a lot, going to really give you a lot more protection than if you only focus on fruits alone. It could be that you're not increasing the variety, right? That you're not balancing your fruits with your vegetables to get all the different colors. You may all be eating from one color. That won't be as beneficial as trying to use the variety to get to all colors every day.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. What do you think, Denise? Anything to add?
Yeah, I think just back on, what you said originally, Sandra, what if I just eat 3 apples a day? 3 apples a day are only going to give you what an apple can give you. And to Elaine's point, when you think of it in terms of color, the more colors we add, the more different types of vitamins and minerals and fiber and nutrients we're going to get. And I think for most of us at this point, and certainly for me at my age, my focus now is disease prevention, right? And I'm sure many in our group feel the same. And whether we want to prevent Alzheimer's or we want to prevent heart disease or cancer, trying to prevent these diseases, if you think in terms of that, boy, oh boy, then you say to yourself, hey, if I can just have different colors every day in my diet and know that I'm going to get, maybe, I'm blanking out on some of the names, but lutein from this or carotene from this, or, all these wonderful different things, then it becomes easier to say, okay, maybe not 3 apples a day, but maybe I will have some blueberries and an apple and some peaches and some strawberries and perhaps a banana. And I'm sure we'll talk about soon how we can work those things into our daily diet.
Mm-hmm. Now, so it sounds like we need to definitely have a variety of fruits in our diet and not just be one. But I'm also wondering, isn't too much fruit bad for you? I hear, especially so many people now have diabetes, and some people are like, oh no, I cannot eat fruit. Fruit is bad for diabetes. And some others are like, yes, eat a lot of fruit. So talking particularly about diabetes, and I know that you are a diabetes expert, Denise, so you're a certified diabetes educator. What's the answer for people with diabetes? Yes or no to fruits? Why?
Sure, and that's a great question. And so when I counsel people with diabetes, sometimes that's one of the first things they ask about. They're newly diagnosed with diabetes and their doctor has told them cut out all the sugar, and so they essentially thought they were doing a good thing by cutting out all the fruits in their diet. And so what I try to talk to them about is, look, fruits are a good type of food, and if you like them, we certainly want to figure out a way to work those in. Now, for somebody with diabetes, certainly they're going to be more mindful about the effect of each type of fruit on their blood sugar, but they can still be worked in. And so for people with diabetes, we often talk about something called pattern management. And what that means is a person with diabetes might test their blood sugar before a meal, consume a meal, and perhaps it includes fruit, and test their blood sugar a couple of hours later. they can learn to see the impact of how different foods affect their blood sugar. Some people will say when they have diabetes that they find certain fruits work better than others, perhaps because of the fiber content in each different type of fruit. So to answer your question, for people with diabetes, absolutely fruit can be worked in. I probably do tend to encourage people with diabetes who have been used to drinking fruit juices to try and get away from that and substitute fresh fruit in place of that. Because we do know juices, for the most part, especially for people with diabetes, can have an impact on their blood sugar.
Now, you're mentioning a couple of interesting words that lead to topics. And you just said juice. Are we talking about, like the 100% juice at the store, or are we talking about juicing? Because that, I understand, is a whole complete art, not to say the least, So, Elaine, what do you think? Like, I see you nodding, so I'm picking on you. Like, tell us about juicing and all of that. How is a juice made at home different than one in the supermarket?
Well, to answer that question, I guess it would really depend on your juicer. What's really critical here for blood sugar control is the fiber content. And so generally the whole fruit, like Denise was saying in the very beginning, is so critical to not raise the blood sugar so quickly. So if you're juicing the whole food and you're not throwing away the fiber, your juicer is not going to separate the fiber out, then that is a better choice with juicing. And fruit has a role, I think, in creating some natural juices, as long as the portion of vegetables is greater than the portion of fruit. And I think something to really keep in mind, a great guide when it comes to juicing, is Denise's point that, a serving of fruit is relatively small. And so it's always a good idea to spread fruit out. So, and you can easily put 3 or 4 servings of fruit into one blender. And so you have to be mindful of the fact that when you're adding fruit, you have to be thinking about how many servings of fruit are in there. So keeping it down to, 1 serving of fruit and then balancing that with some other vegetables is probably a wiser choice than putting just a lot of fruit into a machine and making a juice out of it. Knowing also that liquids are going to get absorbed a lot quicker than something solid that you have to chew.
Okay, so, and again, I just want to, invite all participants to help me with questions. Just use the Q&A box or the chat box to ask your questions. Elaine, okay, so to stay in the juicing topic, I've seen people who do strawberries, bananas, and then they add blueberries and, a whole mix of, it's like a fruit salad to the blender. And they drink that. So we shouldn't be doing that. Isn't that like a good way of getting our intake of fruit for the day?
It could be, but you have to be mindful. I think where it becomes very confusing for people is that not all fruits are equal. So there are some fruits that are not very sweet, and then there are other fruits that, like a banana, the portion for a banana is very small because of the sugar content of the banana. Whereas if you're talking about papaya, you could use a half a papaya and there would, not be that much sugar in the papaya. That's why berries are so great, because they're very low in sugar. So just keeping in mind that fruits are not equal. And pineapple, mango, they're much sweeter fruits. So it depends on, how sweet the fruit is that you're using.
Okay. Now, Denise, you mentioned fiber a few times. So tell us about fiber. Why is fiber important?
So fiber does a lot of good things for our body, right? And so from one of the simplest ways, fiber makes us feel full. So if we're consuming a meal that is fiber rich, we will tend to feel fuller and more satisfied. And why is that good? Well, we'll eat less. We'll be satisfied with a more balanced portion size. It also helps with our GI system. And so to keep things moving through our body the way it's supposed to, getting an adequate amount of fiber in our diet. And so, you know, think skins when you think of fruits, right? Instead of peeling them off, eat them, consume them, because this will add to additional fiber. And then there are some types of fiber that have been shown even to help with cholesterol levels. They ought to sort of act like sponges and help to get cholesterol and things like that out of the body. So fiber is a good thing for us for so many different reasons.
Mm-hmm. Can we find fiber in other foods or just on fruits?
Yeah, so fiber is in so many different types of foods, you know, and when you mentioned before about carbohydrates and protein, you know, lots of carbohydrate foods have good amounts of fiber as well. And to Elaine's point earlier, vegetables as well. You know, if you are a person who likes to blend your eyes and make things like smoothies, you really can put a good amount of vegetable into a drink or a smoothie, and you're not going to really taste it. So it's a way that you'll get those additional nutrients in without necessarily having the taste. So kind of balancing it out. You know, when I think of, I'll give you an example for me. I'm not really a breakfast eater per se. You know, I'm one of those people that doesn't really wake up hungry, doesn't really feel like eating a breakfast. And so I have found making a drink as a breakfast works well. And so one of my favorite recipes is I use a low-fat milk, but you could certainly use an almond milk, an oat milk, a soy milk. And I like to add some frozen berries to that, a small piece of banana for sweetness, and some flax meal, which gives us a lot of good nutrients as well, and a little bit of cocoa powder. And I find blending that is, you know, sort of a great meal replacement, but yet it's providing a lot of good nutrients to put into the body. So there's lots of different ways to get fiber in. And you know, again, find what works for you, find what you can be consistent with, and try and get that daily intake in. And always with fiber, we say, remember to get enough fluid in as well. Right? Think of a sponge, and if you have a sponge and you don't put water on it, it's hard and it doesn't work well. So when we put fiber in our body, we have to think about adding fluid as well to make it work the way it's supposed to.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Denise. So Patrick is asking if you have RA, which I imagine is rheumatoid arthritis, a shake like banana, spinach, and blueberries will be good to drink. I guess, you know, going back to the inflammation topic, Elaine, what do you think? It's banana, spinach, and blueberries.
Yeah, I think that probably Denise pointed out that it's a small piece of banana. And if you put that together with a cup of blueberries, that is 2 portions of fruit. So, you know, the important message in that recipe is that there's not a, you know, she's not overdoing the fruit. She's keeping it to 2 portions of fruit, and then she's putting some vegetables in there to balance it. You know, the blueberries are blue, the vegetables are green. The banana is not really a color. So if you wanted to increase the anti-inflammatory potential in that shake, then you might actually choose something like some pineapple chunks that are a much more deeper yellow color, or some papaya that would add some orange. So there's ways of getting you know, a little bit more color variety that can address inflammation if that's your goal.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And what about ginger? Patrick is also asking if we add ginger, Is that gonna make it? I mean, it's gonna taste great. I love ginger, but in terms of inflammation and RA, is the ginger gonna help?
Oh,
Yeah,
I think.
go ahead, Elaine.
Oh, I'm sorry. I would say yes. I don't know about you. Denise, what you were going to say, but the ginger is a spice, and spices are known for their anti-inflammatory qualities. So great for the stomach as well. Really good choice.
Yeah, and I was just going to add to that as well. You know, ginger's a wonderful antioxidant, and so absolutely put that in. It does have a powerful taste, so you might want to experiment with how much you can put in, and you know, while keeping a good flavor and a good taste. And you know, RA, rheumatoid arthritis, very different for different people in terms of foods. You know, what works for them and what doesn't. So I think trial and error is certainly a good way to go. And I think, you know, the idea of what that person asked about, banana and spinach and blueberries, it sounds fantastic. And, you know, you could always play around with all those different ingredients until you find, you know, the right one that works best for you.
Mm-hmm. Now, Jill is asking, would a smoothie with banana, blueberries, yogurt, kale, and peanut butter be good for you? Wow, we're getting lots of recipes here. I'm getting hungry.
So I'll jump in on that one, Jill. Yeah, I think absolutely. I think that's a great one. And, you know, I don't know if any of you, I'm going to give Michelle Kleinman credit for this one. She's on the call with us. And as I said, she's also a registered dietitian nutritionist for the Department of Health. But she turned me on years ago to peanut butter powder. I don't know if you guys are familiar. I certainly wasn't familiar that they have now come out with something called peanut butter powder, and it blends really well, and it provides you with that protein source. And you know, I think all of us as registered dietitians, we think if you can get some protein in your smoothie, that's really making it kind of power punch as well, especially if you're choosing to do it as a meal replacement, the way I told you I do for mine in the morning. And I think I left that out. I actually am adding that peanut butter powder to that morning smoothie. So yeah.
Now listen to this. Jill is saying she also adds honey, cinnamon, and nutmeg to that smoothie. That sounds like dessert to me. And I know cinnamon has also some anti-inflammatory benefits,
Absolutely.
right?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Great choice.
Wow. Wow. Okay. Fruits, like what's the best type? Is it always fresh or canned? Let's talk about canned fruits. Is that a good thing?
So I'll start, and then I'm sure Elaine's going to add some things to it as well. I guess in the priority scheme of it, if you have access to fresh, sure, that might be the first choice. Frozen is equally as nutritious, right? So to keep frozen veggies in your freezer, you know, when they're on sale, stock up on your favorites, put them in the freezer. And honestly, I think canned is a wonderful alternative as well. You know, the main take home I would say with canned fruit is try and get ones that are canned in its own juice or no sugar added. If that's not affordable, buy any fruit in a can and you could throw it in a colander in your sink and, you know, just rinse off some of the sugar and syrup from it. But all of those options can absolutely work. So I think people have to work within, you know, their budgets and choose what is best for them, but they can all work. They're a good option. I will tell you myself as a registered dietitian nutritionist, especially with COVID this past year when getting to food stores was not easy. Boy, I stocked up on canned vegetables, and those were my go-to. You know, I kept canned peaches in the house and pineapple, and that's what we were doing when we couldn't get to the stores and and buy fresh things. So I think they're a wonderful alternative, and I encourage people to have them in the house as well.
Yeah.
Elaine, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, and I think Denise, you're right. It gives you a lot more variety. And one of the things I would add to that is when you think about fruits, they're also grown in very different environments, and there's some fruits that might be treated much more heavily with chemicals in commercial agriculture. So the Environmental Working Group publishes a list of the Dirty Dozen, and strawberries and apples tend to be the most contaminated when it comes to pesticides and herbicides. So keeping that in mind, berries can be a very expensive investment, and especially if you're trying to buy organic. So this is where the frozen can come in really handy, because you're probably more likely going to pay a lot less for some organic frozen berries than you would at the market for the fresh. Also, the fact that the fresh berries tend to disintegrate very quickly and get mold. So the frozen berries that are organic are a great option. And especially if you're going to be making drinks and smoothies, that can be really handy. And canned peaches are actually one of the best ways to have peaches that is going to have less contamination from pesticides than the fresh peaches.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. Yeah, that's very interesting to know. Now, quick question, blender or juicer?
Well, I still maintain that, if your juicer is separating the fiber and you're throwing that fiber away, then you're probably throwing away most of the benefit. So better, to have some kind of a, Vitamix or something that's just going to liquefy the whole fruit and keep it intact.
Yeah, and I'm going to agree with Elaine on that. And, they have different type, it used to be that the Vitamixer, like Elaine said, was the only way to blend things up where you consume the entire food that you were blending. But these days you can get some inexpensive options too. Save your Bed Bath coupons, and they often have the NutriBullet and these type of blenders that are super affordable for everyone, and that they really can blenderize it, as well as those $400 blenders where you're consuming everything. You're getting the entire food in there, but it doesn't necessarily have to taste thick and pulpy. You can get a really good flavor out of that. So that would be a good option. And we want you to get those nutrients. Don't throw them down the trash, right? We want to get them in the body, because we want to put that good fuel in our body that makes it perform well.
Mm-hmm. And here is another one of those, organic or regular?
Yeah, so go ahead, Elaine. You start on that one.
Well, just that it's worth checking out the Environmental Working Group, because you can spend a lot of money on organics when sometimes, there are foods that you can just, give them a good wash. Maybe even using some vinegar. There's some natural washes out there that would remove the residue that's on the fruit. But particularly fruits that have a very soft skin, that's very easy for something to get absorbed into the flesh, like the berries, peaches, they have a much softer peel. And so for that reason, it's all, you're more likely going to benefit from buying the organic, because the chemicals have probably absorbed into the fruit.
Yeah, and I'll just add to what Elaine said. Some fruits that have a super heavy skin, like a banana or even an avocado, we haven't talked about that, and that is certainly a fruit as well. You're going to remove that skin. So don't waste your money on buying organic bananas or organic avocados. They're a lot more money, and you're removing the skin. So chances are, as Elaine said, we're not going to be so worried about the pesticides versus something like a strawberry, you know, where it's a very different type of skin, and so you can consume more of it.
Fruit or vegetable?
Do we eat fruit or vegetables, Sandra? Is that your question?
Yeah, like which one do you think is better? Because some people prefer fruit, some people prefer vegetables. So which one, like if you had to choose one or the other, which one do you think is best?
Mm. Well, I'm going to give my answer that's not answering your question, but I'll give it anyway. And so if you were my client, Sandra, and I was counseling you, I would say, talk to me about your favorite vegetables. Talk to me about your favorite fruits, because I guarantee in our conversation, I would at least be able to get two choices out of you for both of those, even if you weren't necessarily a big veggie person. So I fall back on we want both. I don't want to choose fruits over veggies. I want to find both, and I want to find things that you like, and see that you're willing to consume these things on a daily basis. So that they're both terrific.
And I
Elaine?
would I would perhaps bring in some of the science on that question to answer it, because there were two very good studies that were just published in the last 4 weeks. One in the American Journal of New England Journal of Medicine, and the other one by the American Heart Association. And they were looking at diet and lifestyles, specifically fruits and vegetables, and glycemic index. And so you have to just keep in mind that fruit does have that natural sugar, which is that is absent in vegetables. Vegetables that are not starchy are not going to have an impact on insulin. And so when you're having fruit, you have to keep in mind that your body's going to respond to that fruit by raising insulin. And maybe when you have a normal body weight, chances are your insulin is going to raise to a certain amount, but not too high. Whereas if your body weight is a little high for your height, then oftentimes what happens is that spike in insulin in response is going to be a lot higher. And each time insulin goes up, cell walls get damaged. And so these are things that lead to cardiovascular disease in the long run. So the choice over the fruits and vegetables, I think, is really leaning toward lowering glycemic load. And if you want to lower glycemic load, then you need to focus. You can't discount the vegetable, because the vegetable is really what is going to give you the balance, and it's going to really help your body. When you think about these systems that regulate, that regulate insulin, regulate your blood sugar, these are finely balanced systems. And so when, over long periods of time, when foods are throwing your system off balance, then eventually things are going to happen. So the best way to protect your health is really to keep in mind that vegetables and fruits are two different things. They're not the same, and that it should always be more vegetables than fruits. And I think what Denise is saying, which I agree with her 100%, that if you really think about it, I'm sure that there's maybe one or two vegetables that you can always start with that really aren't so offensive to you, that you really enjoy.
Thank you. And we only have a few minutes left, and I don't want to leave without this question. Like a few months ago, maybe possibly last year or at some point the year before, there was a lot of controversy around the best time to eat fruits. Like something came out saying, oh, you cannot eat fruits at night, they're bad for you, it raises your blood sugars. It was never clear to me if that was totally true or why. So I was hoping to get the answer to that question from you today. Elaine, you sound like you seem ready to answer that. So go ahead.
Well, I would only answer that from the perspective of if you're pregnant. So babies grow at night, babies grow at night while you're sleeping. And so my advice to women who are pregnant is not a good time to be eating fruit at night, and not a good time to be starting the day with fruit. So, but you know, if you're not pregnant, that's a different story. I don't really know. Denise, what do you think?
Yeah, so, I don't know if I'm as familiar with what Sandra was saying about that research and time of day. But look, we all know there's always a study that will show something different. And so I guess if I step back, the big picture is this, and I think you made this point earlier, Elaine. When we're thinking about fruits and consuming, balance it out in terms of over the whole day. I don't think I'm a fan of getting all your servings in first thing in the morning, because to Elaine's point, let's think about it, right? When we consume fruit, insulin is going to have to be secreted at some point to metabolize that. And so we don't want to be putting this extra load on our body where we have to put out these bursts of insulin. So I think if we have the philosophy that let's try and space out our fruits throughout the day. And, from starting with maybe, I think adding a serving to each meal, there's a way that you can get 3 in. And if you do choose to have snacks, perhaps having, 1 or 2 servings that way. So again, never getting one big load into your body at one time, sort of spacing our consumption throughout the day. I mean, that would be my opinion, and that would be how I would counsel somebody in terms of fruit consumption. Because again, there's carbohydrates there. We know that for sure.
So so I shouldn't keep eating a whole watermelon. That's what you're trying to say.
Absolutely, Sandra. Not doing that whole watermelon at once, for sure.
Okay, good. So there are no more questions in the chat box, and we only have 40 minutes left. So I want to just take the opportunity to thank you, Elaine and Denise, for spending this hour with me and all the participants and talk about fruits. Sometimes it's something as easy as fruits, and there could be so much science behind fruits as well. And then next week, we're going to be talking about rotator cuff damage. So if there is any shoulder pain that you might be suffering, this might be very useful information for you. And for those nutrition fans or people who like to watch your weight or like to eat healthier, 2 weeks from now, we're going to be talking about vegetarian diets and what it takes to be a vegetarian, pros and cons, lots about that. Also, let me tell you, this is March. It's National Nutrition Month, and that's why we're heavy on nutrition topics this month, but it's also colon cancer prevention awareness. So just putting out there, if you have any risks or something, touch base with your doctor. It's colon cancer prevention. So do what you need to do to prevent colon cancer. And just talking about that, April 1st, we're gonna close Colon Cancer Prevention Month with a great presentation about how to prevent colon cancer and everything involved. So that's it. We are out of time. Let me see. They're just saying, thank you. 2 surgeries for you in the past, Patrick. We need to talk about that. So, and we need to talk about other stuff. So please stay there. Oh, you had rotator cuff surgery. Yeah, a few people seem to be writing they had rotator cuff surgery. So yes, thank you so much for joining us. Great having you. Another Thursday that is over for us. See you next week.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for having me as well.
A pleasure.